In a universe where fate made a single mistake, humanity finally built its paradise. No poverty, no greed, no war among its own kind. A civilization so gentle, so certain the dark was behind it, that it sent its children to the stars aboard its flagship, a flying village of light, exploring a galaxy it believed it had outgrown. And then a hole tore open in the fabric of that universe, and out of a crueler one fell a single man, a convict, a survivor. A killer with silver eyes, built by a world where nothing gentle lives, the man evolution designed for the dark. The most enlightened humans in the galaxy will try to heal him. They will try to classify him. They will try to judge him. But the hole he fell through did not close clean, and something else came through behind him, something that hunts where light cannot follow. And deck by deck, corridor by corridor, the brightest ship in the universe is about to go dark, and learn why his universe never stopped believing in monsters. Space is not supposed to bleed. In the 4th month of its survey along the edge of the Mare Obscura Nebula, a lightless expanse the old star charts called the Dark Sea, the Federation starship Enterprise found a place where it did. The wound announced itself on the night watch. 3rd shift, 300 hours, the great ship gliding silent past the nebula's black shoals with most of her 1,000 souls asleep, when every long-range sensor on the bridge lit at once, and the duty officer leaned forward in the captain's chair and forgot, for 3 full seconds, to breathe. 40 million kilometers to port, in a region of empty space with no star, no mass, no reason, something had torn. Not a wormhole, the readings were wrong for a wormhole. Not a Borg conduit, not a graviton anomaly, not any of the 100 catalogued ways the galaxy misbehaved. This was a laceration, a ragged, weeping gash in the fabric of reality itself, 4 kilometers long, its edges shimmering with energies the ship's library could not name. And it was bleeding wreckage. Debris drifted from the wound in a slow, glittering hemorrhage, hull fragments, tumbling slag, the shattered bones of machines, spilling out of the tier and into the dark of Federation space like flotsam washing out of a drowned world. By 3:20, the captain was on the bridge in his uniform with tea going cold in his hand. By 400, the Enterprise had closed to survey range, and the main view screen filled with the impossible, and Jean-Luc Picard stood at the center of his bridge, studying the torn edge of his universe, with the expression of a man reading a letter written in a language he almost recognized. Analysis, Mr. Data. At the operations console, the android's fingers moved faster than human eyes could track. The debris is metallurgically unremarkable, Captain, duranium alloys, titanium composites, standard matter. A pause, and Data's head tilted by the precise degree that his crewmates had learned, meant the universe has surprised me. However, its quantum signature is not standard. Every particle of this wreckage resonates at a frequency that does not match our universe. Captain, this material did not travel here from another sector. He turned in his chair. It fell here from another reality. The bridge went quiet in the way bridges do, when the word reality starts behaving like a place instead of a fact. They cataloged the wreckage for 2 hours, and the wreckage told a story none of them liked. This had been a ship, one ship, torn to pieces either by the passage through the wound or by something before it, and it had not been a gentle ship. Riker's away teams found hull plating scorched by weapons fire. They found the fragments of a cargo hold fitted with restraint anchors. They found, drifting in the slow glitter, a battered Durasteel door stenciled in a human language and an inhuman philosophy, lockdown level 9. And beneath the stencil, gouged into the metal, the tally marks of someone counting days. A prison transport, Riker said quietly on the bridge as the door tumbled past the view screen. Or a mercenary hauler. Somebody's universe plays rough. Indeed, Picard murmured. The question is whether anything aboard it survived the crossing. The answer arrived at 6:42, when Lieutenant Worf's tactical sweep found the pod. It hung at the far edge of the debris field, past the slag and the shattered bones, intact and utterly dark. A cryogenic pod of no known design, its hull the color of old gunmetal, pitted and carbon-scored and ancient, built in a style that was less engineering than armor. It was 2.5 meters of scarred alloy shaped like a coffin that expected trouble, and it was running, barely, on some final whisper of internal power, a single amber telltale pulsing on its flank like a slow heartbeat in the dark. And its surface told a story too, for those with the eyes to read it. Worf read it from tactical, and his scowl deepened by degrees as the Magnificat. Ian climbed. The scarring on the pod was not all from the crossing. Some of it was old battle damage. But down the length of the casing, deep and violent and unmistakable, ran gouges, long, raking, parallel scores torn into military-grade alloy in sets of 4. Something, at some point in that pod's long service, had tried very hard to claw its way in. "Captain," Worf rumbled, "I recommend we do not bring that aboard." Noted, Mr. Worf. Picard studied the slow amber pulse of the heartbeat light. "Life signs." "1," said Data. "Faint. Cryogenic suspension badly degraded. Humanoid apparently human. Sir, the pod's power reserves are failing. Whoever is inside has, at current rates of decay, less than 3 hours." And that settled it, because it was the Enterprise, and because the whole vast, gentle apparatus of the Federation had been built by people who pull drowning strangers out of the sea first and ask their names after. Picard gave the order. The tractor beam reached out across the dark and drew the scarred coffin of another universe into Shuttle Bay 2. And it was there, with the pod still 10 meters off the deck and descending, that Deanna Troi, summoned from sleep to evaluate a rescued survivor, walked through the shuttle bay doors and stopped as though she had hit a wall. The color left her face all at once. Deanna, Beverly Crusher was beside her, medkit in hand. "What is it?" "He's dreaming." Troy's voice came out low and careful, the voice of a woman describing something she did not want to look at directly. Her eyes never left the descending pod. "The mind inside, it's deep under, barely alive, and it's dreaming, and She stopped, steadied herself against the bulkhead. In 11 years of Starfleet service in first contacts with 100 alien minds, the ship's counselor had learned the taste of every kind of dreamer. This was none of them. There's no fear in it. He's dying in a box in the dark, and there is no fear in him anywhere. The dream is all motion, angles, distances, doors." She made herself say the rest. "Captain, I've sensed the minds of Klingons, of Kardashians, of soldiers and killers of a dozen kinds, and every one of them dreams like a person. This one dreams like a predator. Even unconscious, even dying, some part of him is still hunting." The pod settled onto the deck of Shuttle Bay 2 with a boom like a closing vault, and the amber heartbeat pulsed in the silence. "Then we will wake him carefully," Picard said at last. "Sickbay doctor under guard." They opened it on Deck 12, in the bright, warm, humming sanctuary of the Enterprise's sickbay, with 2 security officers at the wall and Worf standing close enough to intervene, and every gentle instrument of Federation medicine standing ready. And what the failing pod exhaled, when Crusher finally released its seals into a hiss of ancient freezing fog, was a man. He lay in the coffin's padded cradle like something the dark had made and then set aside. Human, the scanners insisted on it, a big man, heavy through the shoulders, his scalp shaved, his skin carrying the story of a life the Federation had spent 3 centuries forgetting was possible. Knife scars, burned scars, the puckered signatures of old projectile wounds, and around both wrists in layered rings, the unmistakable callousing of a lifetime spent in restraints. Not one imprisonment, dozens. Shackle scarring laid down over shackle scarring, year upon year, the way a tree lays down rings. And over his eyes, fitted so close they might have been part of him, a pair of black welding goggles. Why would a man in cryosleep need? One of the security officers began. Because someone did something to his eyes, Crusher said quietly, reading her tricorder. Or his eyes do something the rest of us should be glad we can't. She moved the scanner down the body, and her frown deepened with every centimeter, because the readings kept arriving and the readings kept being wrong. Captain, he reads as human, but his bone density is nearly 40% beyond human maximum. Muscle fiber composition I've never seen hyperadapted, like the tissue itself grew up under punishment. Pain receptor response is suppressed far below baseline, healing markers off the chart. This isn't genetic engineering, there's no augmentation signature, no sequencing artifacts. This is, she looked up, evolution, Gene Luke, natural selection. This man's body was built the honest way by generations of something terrible. Whatever world his people come from, it did to them what Earth's oceans did to sharks. Picard stood over the pod, over the scarred, sleeping shape of the hardest man the gentlest universe had ever recovered, and was silent for a long moment. One man, he said finally, adrift in a dying pod in the wreckage of a prison ship from a universe that builds people like weapons. He straightened. Very well. Revive him slowly, doctor. Full medical care, full courtesy. Whatever he is, whatever he was, he is a survivor in distress, and this ship will treat him as one. But Mr. Worf, the captain's eyes stayed on the goggles, on the wrists, on the 40 years of shackle rings. Your people will remain, and no one is to be alone with him. Humanitarian instincts and blind trust are not the same discipline. It was 2 hours later, with the stranger stabilized and warming toward consciousness in the bright of sickbay, that Data requested the captain's presence in stellar cartography and quietly closed the door. The great chamber's dome was filled with the android's reconstruction of the event. The wound in space rendered in cold light, the debris field mapped particle by particle, vectors and masses annotated in drifting gold. It was meticulous. It was complete. It was, Data explained, precisely the problem. I have accounted for the entire debris field, Captain, every fragment, cross-referenced against the structural mass of the vessel it once composed, the arithmetic balances. He highlighted the field, the gold numbers aligned. With 2 exceptions. The first is the cryogenic pod now aboard. The second, Data touched the console and a red vector bloomed in the dome, separating from the debris cloud at the moment of the rift's opening and curving away into darkness. Is this a second mass, Captain? It came through the rupture 11 seconds after the pod, moving under its own power on an evasive heading. It was not debris. Debris does not maneuver. I have reviewed the telemetry 14 times. Whatever it was, it used the wreckage as sensor cover, held our shadow for 6 minutes. The red vector bent, impossibly, curling back through the map dark toward a rendering of the Enterprise herself. And then it closed to within 400 meters of this ship. At which point, Captain, it disappears from every sensor we have. It does not register as a vessel. It does not register as life. The red vector ended at the Enterprise's hull, just aft of Shuttle Bay 2. Data, Picard said slowly, into the humming dark of stellar cartography. Are you telling me the pod was not the only thing we brought back from that graveyard? No, sir, said Data. I am telling you we may not have brought it back at all. I am telling you it may have followed. And 14 decks below, in the bright, warm hush of sickbay, where the monitors pulsed gentle and green, and the security officers had begun, in the 3rd hour, to relax against the wall. The stranger from the crueler universe lay perfectly still in the biobed's light. The monitors said he was unconscious. The monitors had said so for some time. The monitors did not see what the goggles hid, that behind the black lenses, in the one dark place in all that shining room, the sleeper's eyes had been open for 11 minutes, listening, counting the guards by their breathing, mapping the exits by the sounds of the doors, and smelling, threaded faint through the clean, recycled air of paradise, something the bright, warm people around him had no name for yet. Something he did. The stranger let them believe they woke him. At 11:40 hours, ship's time, the biobed's monitors registered the shift from unconsciousness to waking, a tidy, gradual, medically textbook ascent that Dr. Crusher watched with satisfaction, and that was, from first reading to last, a performance. The man had been awake for the better part of an hour. He had simply seen no percentage in telling anyone until he had finished counting the room. 2 guards, breathing lazy, weapons holstered with the straps still snapped, amateurs, or a place so safe it made amateurs of soldiers. 1 Klingon by the door who was neither. 4 exits including the ceiling access. And light, endless, sourceless, merciless light, pouring off every white surface of the cleanest room he had ever been a prisoner in. When he finally moved, he moved all at once, sitting up out of dead stillness in a single silent motion that put both security officers' hands on their phasers and did not put Worf's on his, because Worf had known for 20 minutes that the readings were lying. Easy. Crusher stepped forward, palms open, into the space between the stranger and her own security detail, a piece of unconscious courage that the man behind the goggles filed away as either the bravest or most foolish thing he'd seen in years. You're safe. You were adrift in a cryogenic pod. We recovered you, treated you. You're aboard the Federation starship Enterprise. I'm Dr. Crusher. Can you tell me your name? The stranger sat in the bright room, in the soft medical gown they dressed his scars in, and turned his goggled face slowly through 180 degrees, reading the guards, the Klingon, the doors, the doctor, before answering the only question worth answering. Whose prison is this? It's not a prison, it's a hospital. Well, Crusher gestured, a starship. You're not a prisoner here, you're patient. A pause. The goggles came back to her. Right, said Richard B. Riddick. Whose hospital is this? They gave him quarters, and that was the first thing that convinced him something was deeply wrong with these people. Not a cell. Quarters, Deck 8 guest section, a room larger than most transports he'd stolen, with carpet, a viewport full of stars, a bed built for comfort instead of restraint, and a device in the wall that manufactured food. Any food. He tested it the way he tested everything, asked it for water, watched the water appear out of nothing, drank half, waited 40 minutes for the drug to hit. No drug. Asked it for meat. Real meat, hot, seasoned, free. He ate standing, back to the wall, watching the door. The door was the second thing. It locked. He'd heard the guard detail take position outside, 2 of them, rotating on 4s, but when he walked toward it, it opened. Just like that. The guards outside straightened. The big one put a hand up, polite as a maitre d', confined to guest quarters and the adjoining section pending the captain's review, sir. Sorry, sir. And then the door closed again, and Riddick stood in the middle of the finest cage he had ever inhabited, and did the math, and the math would not balance. He had been in slams built into frozen mountains and slams built into burning ones. He had been in triple max facilities where the cells were suspended over darkness and the guards ran betting pools on the dying. He knew prisons the way sailors know weather, and every prison in the universe ran on the same engine. Leverage. Fear, pain, debt, hunger, something the wardens held over you, something to trade, something to break. That was the shape of the world. That was the shape of every world. This place had removed the engine, food without price, medicine without debt, guards who said sir and meant it, a door that opened. "So where's the catch?" Riddick said quietly, to the room, to the stars in the viewport, to whatever surveillance was surely listening. "There's always a catch." The room did not answer. The catch did not come, and Richard B. Riddick, who had walked calm into monster dens and necromonger throne rooms, sat down in the too comfortable chair, facing the door, more unsettled than he had been in years. 2 decks up, in the observation lounge, the ship's senior staff was conducting the mirror image of the same investigation, Paradise trying to compute the predator, and arriving at answers that balanced no better. "His name is Riddick, that's essentially all he's given us. Richard B. Riddick." Crusher spread the medical file across the table display. "Physiologically, I've never seen anything like him. He heals at roughly 4 times human baseline. His pain response is nearly flat. I treated 2nd-degree cryoburn on his shoulder and he watched. And his eyes," she brought up the scan, and the room leaned in. "Retinas layered with a reflective structure like polished silver, pupils built for a lightless world. It's a tapetum lucidum the mirror animals have. Cats, sharks, nothing human has this. He can see in total darkness, Captain, and the price is that ordinary light causes him pain, hence the goggles." "An adaptation," Data observed, "with only one evolutionary purpose. His lineage did not merely survive darkness, Captain. It hunted in it for generations." "The wreckage tells the rest," Riker said. "Prison transport, restraint cargo, weapons scoring. Our guest was freight." He looked around the table. "The question is what kind? Refugee or cargo dangerous enough that somebody built that pod to hold him?" "Both," said Deanna Troi, "and neither." The table turned to her. The counselor had been quiet through the briefing, and there were shadows under her eyes, because she had spent an hour that morning sitting across from the stranger in the guest quarters. An hour of pleasant, careful, useless conversation, and beneath it, an hour of reading the most orderly mind she had ever touched. "I want to be precise," Troi said slowly, "because everything about him invites imprecision. When the pod came aboard, I told you he dreams like a predator. Awake, it's more and less." She chose the words like footing. "There is no malice in him. None, I searched. No cruelty, no sadism, no rage looking for a target. His mind is quieter than half this cruise. What there is instead is calculus. Constant, effortless, bottomless. Every person who enters his space is weighed, threat, asset, obstacle, exit, and filed, and the filing never stops. When Dr. Crusher leans over him, some part of him has already worked out the 3 fastest ways to disable her. Not because he intends to, he doesn't, but because the machinery runs whether he intends or not." She looked at Picard. "He's not planning to hurt anyone, Captain. He's planning how he would. It isn't hatred, it's how he breathes. Whatever universe built that man, it taught him from birth that every row. Ohm is a trap and everything alive in it is a variable. And Captain, here is the part I need you to hear. The universe that taught him that was telling the truth. The trauma isn't a distortion in him. It's an accuracy. And I have no protocol for treating a patient whose damage is a correct map of where he comes from." Silence around the table. "And his read of us?" Picard asked quietly. "Confusion," Troi said. "Genuine, deepening confusion. He keeps testing for the trap and finding kindness, and every kindness disturbs him more than a threat would. This ship is the first thing in his life his map can't explain." She hesitated. "Captain, he isn't afraid of us. I don't think he's afraid of anything in the conventional sense, but we unsettle him, and I genuinely cannot predict what a man like that does when his map fails." What the man did, as it happened, was walk. They permitted him the adjoining section, Deck 8, guest corridors, a stretch of paradise under discreet escort, and Riddick walked it the way he walked every facility, learning it. Junctions, panel seams, the rhythm of the doors. Worf walked 3 paces behind, and the two of them conducted, in total silence, the most honest conversation anyone aboard had yet had with him, predator pacing, warrior watching, each fluent in the other's quiet. It was at the corridor's end, at the wide observation window overlooking the atrium 3 decks below, that the stranger's stride broke for the first time. Stopped dead, in fact, so abruptly that Worf's hand drifted toward his phaser before he followed the goggles' line of sight down through the glass to the atrium garden, where a class of schoolchildren was crossing the green in a chattering double line, a teacher at the front, a straggler at the back dragging a model starship through the air, 11 children walking, unguarded, through the open heart of the ship. Riddick stood at the glass for a long time. "Malfunction on your ship," he said finally. "Specify," said Worf. "Those are kids. The Enterprise carries families. Crews serve tour of years, their children live aboard. There are 111 minors on this vessel." Worf said it flatly, a fact among facts. "There is a school on Deck 10, a nursery on Deck 12. The goggles stayed on the glass. Below, the straggler swooped his model through a loop and ran to catch the line, and somewhere behind black lenses, the most orderly mind Deanna Troi had ever read was experiencing catastrophic failure, because a warship was a fact, and a soft warship was a joke, but a warship that carried its children into the dark was neither fact nor joke. It was a civilization so certain of its own safety that it had bet its young on the certainty. Every calculation Riddick had run since sickbay reshuffled at once around the new variable. These people were not soft. Soft was a strategy, and strategies he understood. These people were something his map had no symbol for. Sheep offered the old cold voice in him, the one that had kept him alive through every slam and every dark. A whole ship of sheep who forgot what wolves look like. Maybe Riddick answered it, watching the children go, or the only universe that ever won. "You disapprove," Worf rumbled. "I think you people better hope your luck holds," Riddick said and walked on. It was 4 hours later, evening, by the ship's gentle lie of a clock, that both of the day's quiet threads pulled tight at once. The first thread nobody noticed. On Deck 36, in the humid dark of a Jeffries tube junction behind the secondary water reclamation plant, a 2-man maintenance team found something fouling the atmospheric filters. A residue, organic, faintly iridescent, smeared along the crawlway walls in long parallel streaks, as though something had dragged itself through the junction and left it slick behind. It smelled of ammonia and old meat. Ensign DeVary logged it as biological contaminant, source unknown, filters replaced, flagged it routine, and moved on to the next work order, because it was the Enterprise, the safest ship in the quadrant, and residue in a crawlway was a janitorial fact, not a tactical one. The report entered the maintenance queue 71 items deep. No one read it. The second thread was in guest quarters on Deck 8, where Richard B. Riddick lay on top of the too comfortable bed, boots on, facing the door, and went, between one breath and the next, absolutely still. The air. It cycled through paradise clean and warm and scrubbed, the same recycled breath endlessly laundered, and threaded through it now faint, 1 part in a billion, a ghost a bloodhound would have missed, came something he had smelled twice before in his life. Once in the wreck of a mining outpost on a world with 3 suns. Once in the dark outside a crash site in the long night when the sounds began. Ammonia, old meat, and under it the sweet chemical stink of something that grows fast and molts as it grows. Riddick sat up in the dark of his quarters, in the heart of the safest ship in the gentlest universe, and took off his goggles, silver eyes catching the starlight like coins at the bottom of a well, and looked at the air vent above his door for a long, long moment. "Well," he said softly, "there it is." The catch. The android came first. It was, the stranger would decide later, the smartest thing the ship ever did, sending the machine before the captain, though no one aboard had planned it as strategy. Data simply requested the interview, the way Data requested most things, out of a curiosity so vast and patient it had outlived every insult ever aimed at it. He arrived at the guest quarters at 900, sat where Riddick indicated, back to the door, without hesitation, the first being aboard to surrender the tactical seat knowingly, and folded his hands, and studied the goggled man across the low table with eyes the color of old gold. "I am told you can see in absolute darkness," Data said. "I am curious what that is like." "Ask your sensors, they see in the dark." "They do, but they do not experience it. That is the distinction I am attempting to investigate." The android tilted his head. "I am an artificial life form. I was constructed, not born. I have spent my existence attempting to move in one direction toward humanity. You interest me, Mr. Riddick, because you appear to have been offered the same journey and declined it. You were born human. You have elected to be otherwise." The goggles regarded him for a long moment. And then Riddick did something the surveillance logs would record, and the senior staff would replay several times without agreeing on its meaning. He laughed, short, low, genuine. "You're the only honest thing on this boat, you know that?" He leaned back. "Everybody else here works real hard at forgetting what they're made of. You can't forget, it's all spec sheets with you, no stories." He tapped his own chest. "Where I come from, this is a spec sheet too. Muscle built for gravity that kills, eyes built for the dark. A whole world's worth of dead ancestors who paid for every piece of it. Your shipmates look at me and see a man who chose to be an animal." The goggles caught the light. "There was no choosing machine, there was just Furia. The choosing is what came after, same as you. You're not walking toward humanity, you're walking toward choosing. Different thing, better thing." Data considered this for 1.4 seconds, which for Data was a long and stormy silence. "I believe," he said at last, "that is the most useful thing anyone has said to me in several years. I have one further question." The gold eyes did not blink. "You have assessed every member of this crew as a variable. I have observed you doing so. How do you assess me?" "Only thing on the ship I can't smell," Riddick said. "Makes you the only thing on the ship I'd worry about. A beat. Take it as a compliment." "I do," said Data, and meant it. The captain came at noon, or rather, the captain sent for him, which told Riddick most of what he needed to know before the ready room doors ever opened. Territory. The man wanted the conversation on his own ground, behind his own desk, with Earl Grey steaming and a lieutenant's worth of security in the corridor pretending to be furniture. Riddick walked in, read the room in half a second, one exit, one viewport, one old sword on the wall that was for remembering and not for using, and took the chair he was offered, and the two universes finally sat down across a desk from each other. Jean-Luc Picard had rehearsed none of it, which was itself a decision. He had read Troy's report until he could recite it. The trauma isn't a distortion, it's an accuracy, and had concluded that the only approach a mind like that would not instantly dismantle was the truth. "I'll be direct with you, Mr. Riddick. This ship recovered you, this ship is responsible for you, and I must decide what you are to us. The wreckage you arrived in suggests you were a prisoner. The scarring on your wrists suggests you have been one many times. In this universe, aboard this ship, none of that binds you. We have no treaty with your reality, no warrant for your past, and frankly, no appetite for one." Picard set down his tea. "The Federation does not punish men for what a crueler universe made of them. We ask only what a man intends to be. I'm asking you." And there it is, Riddick said. There what is? The catch. Took your people 2 days to get to it. Longest anybody's ever taken. The goggles tilted toward the viewport, the stars, the impossible gentle vastness of it. Except it's not a catch, is it? You actually mean it. Free food, free doctors, door that opens, and now the warden's office, and the warden's not selling anything either. He wants to rehabilitate. The word came out of him like something held with tongs. Seen a lot of systems, Captain. Slams that break you F. Or profit. Slams that break you for fun. Never seen one that wants to fix you. Didn't think the universe had the parts. This universe built different machinery, Picard said quietly. 3 centuries ago, my species was yours, Mr. Riddick. Brutal, scarred, certain the dark was the only truth. We nearly died of that certainty. And then slowly, at tremendous cost, we chose otherwise. No hunger, no greed worth killing for, no war among our own kind. I won't pretend we're finished, we are not. But the animal you keep waiting to meet aboard this ship, the captain spread his hands, we outgrew him. That is not naivety. That is the single hardest thing my species ever did. And Riddick was quiet for a moment, because the man across the desk was not what the map predicted. Not soft, not a salesman, a believer with scar tissue of his own. Riddick could hear old command grief in the voice the way you hear old breaks in a bone, and the belief was load-bearing. The whole gleaming ship hung off it, which made what came next almost a mercy. You didn't outgrow him, Captain, Riddick said. You just built better lights. He rose, unhurried, and walked to the viewport, and the stars lit the goggles as he looked out at the dark between them. Everything on this boat is lit. Corridors that never go dark, sensors that see every deck. Replicators so nobody's hungry, doctors so nobody's desperate, counselors so nobody's alone. You didn't evolve the animal out, Captain, you evolved the conditions out. Take a wolf, raise him where the meat's free and the winter never comes, wait 300 years, you don't get a better wolf. You get a wolf who's never been hungry. He turned. Your people aren't past the dark. They've just never met it. There's a difference, and the difference is the most dangerous thing on this ship, because you've bet 1,000 lives and a deck full of kids that the meeting never comes. Out where I'm from, we've got a saying about ships like this one. The goggles came level with the captain's eyes. The brightest lights throw the longest shadows. Something always lives in them. A grim philosophy, Picard said, from a universe that gave you no other. An accurate one, said Riddick, Troy's own word, arrived at from the other side, and here's the part you're not gonna like. It's not a philosophy today, it's a report. He came back to the desk, and his voice dropped into something flat and operational that made the captain go very still. Something came through the hole with me, Captain. It's on your ship. I can smell it in your air, been smelling it since last night. Ammonia, old meat, molt stink. I've met it before, or its cousins, on a world with 3 suns where the night lasts a month, and it cost me people the smallest hitch, gone as fast as it came. It cost. It grows fast, it breeds faster, and it does its work in exactly the one place your paradise doesn't reach. He straightened. The dark behind your walls, check your crawl spaces, check your air, and do it before your lights start going out, because the thing I'm smelling doesn't attack a ship, Captain. It infests one. For a long moment, the ready room was silent, but for the hum of the ship. Then Picard did precisely what his universe had built him to do. He took the warning seriously, and he took it to his instruments. A full internal sensor sweep, every deck, every conduit, every crawlspace, the finest sensing apparatus in the quadrant turned inward on its own body. It took 90 minutes. It found microfractures, a coolant weep on deck 31, 2 crewmen who had misplaced their comm badges. It found no intruder, no biosigns unaccounted for, nothing. Sensors read clean, Captain, Riker reported, and because he was a good first officer and an honest man, added the caveat that everyone in the room was thinking. Of course, Data's second mass didn't read as life either. And here the Enterprise arrived at the fork that would decide everything, and chose the way its whole gentle universe had taught it to choose. The warning came from a traumatized survivor, whose own counselor certified that his mind read every room as a trap. The instruments came from 3 centuries of the finest science humanity had ever built. Picard weighed the animal's nose against Paradise's eyes, genuinely weighed it, to his lasting credit, staring long at the clean sweep results, and ordered increased maintenance patrols, flagged the anomaly file active, and did not put a ship of families on combat alert over a smell. It was the reasonable decision. It was made by a reasonable man, in a universe that had forgotten reasonable and right are only usually the same thing. Worf came to him that evening off shift, in the ready room's low light, and the Klingons' council was the segment's quiet hinge, though no one would know it for a day yet. "You believe him," Picard said. "It wasn't a question." "I believe his nose over our sensors," Worf said. Bluntly, "Captain, the crew sees a damaged man. Troy's report sees a patient. They are not wrong, but I have walked beside him for 2 days and I am telling you what I see because no one else aboard is equipped to see it." The Klingon's voice dropped into the register he reserved for things that mattered. "That man is not a patient. He is a warrior, the kind my grandfather's stories were about from before we softened our own stories. He wastes nothing. He fears nothing. He watches the children in the atrium the way a guard dog watches a gate, and he warned us, Captain, which a predator does not do. Predators do not warn. Sentries warn." Worf straightened. "Treat him as one. Because if his nose is right and our lights are wrong, this ship has exactly one being aboard who has survived what is coming, and we have him under guard on Deck 8. Picard looked out at the stars for a long time after the Klingon left. Deck 36 settled the argument at 2:47 the next morning, in its own way, in the dark behind the walls where Paradise did not reach. Ensign Marta Devari, the same ensign whose contamination report still sat unread, now 68 items deep in the maintenance queue, went back to the water reclamation junction on a follow-up work order, alone, because the Enterprise was the safest ship in the quadrant and maintenance was a one-person job. Her comm badge registered her entering the Jeffries tube network at 2:47. At 2:53, it registered a spike in her heart rate, 3 seconds long. At 2:54, it stopped registering anything at all, not a death, not a removal, just a cessation, as though the badge and its wearer had been subtracted from the ship's arithmetic. And the internal sensors, the ones that could find a comm badge in seconds, swept the junction and the crawlways and the whole humid dark of Deck 36. And found nothing, no ensign, no remains, no intruder, no life. By morning, there was a second name on the missing list, a technician, Deck 34, last logged entering a conduit access at 4:31, and a security team standing in the junction where Devari's badge had ceased, playing their lights over the walls of the crawlway, over the long parallel streaks of iridescent slick, old and new, layer over layer, leading away into the unlit dark behind the shining ship. More streaks than yesterday, many more. And 14 decks up, in the guest quarters on Deck 8, Richard B. Riddick stood at his viewport in the small hours with his goggles off, listening to the faint, patient, almost nothing sounds moving through the walls of Paradise, and began, methodically, without anyone's permission, to sharpen the edge of a broken chair leg against the replicator housing. The lights hadn't gone out yet. He got ready anyway. The lights of the Enterprise had burned without interruption for 11 years. They went out for the first time at 3:08 on the 4th night, on Deck 36, exactly where the animal had said the dark would come. It began with the search team, Lieutenant Ramos and 3 security officers, sent down into the Jeffries network behind water reclamation to sweep the junction where Ensign DeVary's comm badge had ceased. 4 capable people with palm beacons and phasers, crawling through the humid arteries of a ship that had never once been dangerous to its own crew. Their lights played over the iridescent streaks. Their tricorders read nothing alive. They went in at 3:01, reporting normally. At 3:06, Ramos's voice came up the channel with a new texture in it. "Bridge, we've got something here. The conduit walls." There's a pause, the sound of a gloved hand touching something that crackled like dry leaves. Shed material, organic casings layered, dozens of them like husks, big ones. Whatever left these has been molting, getting bigger each time, and the newest ones are another pause, longer. And then, very quietly, the way people speak when their body has understood something before their mind has. The newest ones are 2 meters long. "Bridge, I don't think this is one organism." At 3:07, we're hearing movement in the walls, multiple contacts. Tricorders still read nothing. It's all around us, and the tricorders say the walls are empty. At 3:08, the lights went out. Not just their beacons, the deck. 36's entire EPS grid died in the space of a breath, power rerouting alarms cascading up through engineering. And in the sudden absolute black of the crawlways, 40 meters deep in the body of the ship, the bridge heard Lieutenant Ramos's team discover what the universe on the other side of the rift already knew. The sounds lasted 11 seconds. Phaser fire, 3 bursts strobing the dark, a scream that ended too early. Ramos's voice, one last time, not screaming, dead calm in the way of soldiers finishing their duty with what's left. They eat the power, Bridge, they're eating the... Then the channel folded into static, and the static folded into silence, and the Enterprise, for the first time in her gleaming life, had a deck she did not control. By dawn, ship's time, she had 3. The senior staff stood around the Master System's display in engineering and watched their ship being consumed, and the horror of it was the elegance. Geordi LaForge traced the failures for them with a voice he kept level by main force. The creatures. And there was no longer any doubt that there were creatures, whole generations of them, bred up from something that had slipped aboard in the wreckage's shadow 4 days ago, were not attacking the Enterprise at all. They were grazing on her. They tapped EPS conduits the way ticks tap a vein, gnawing through shielding to drink the energized plasma inside, and every conduit they opened took another section dark. Lights, sensors, force fields, the whole shining nervous system of paradise going numb, one artery at a time. "They're not eating the ship, Captain. They're eating the light." Geordi's hands moved over the failure map, deck 36 black, 35 black, 34 failing, the dark spreading upward through the ship's body like rot through a tooth. Plasma feeders. They metabolize charged particles, that's why nothing reads them. Their biochemistry runs on our power signature, so to internal sensors they don't look like life. They look like the ship. He looked up, and behind the visor his face was gray. "And sir, the feeding pattern isn't random. They took environmental control on 36 first, then internal sensors, then lights. They're eating our eyes ahead of their own advance. That's not grazing, that's strategy." "Numbers," Riker said. "Unknown. Growth rate from the molt casing suggests." Geordi stopped, recalculated, hoping to be wrong, and wasn't. "The original organism came aboard 4 days ago. Based on casing sizes and clutch residue in the reclamation plant, we're looking at 3 molt generations. Conservatively, 60 adults. By tomorrow, twice that. They breed in the dark they make, Captain. Every deck they take is a nursery." Picard stood very still at the display, watching the black spread through the schematic of his ship, and the words that came to him, unbidden, unwanted, in a low, rough voice from a universe away, were 4 days old. "It doesn't attack a ship, Captain. It infests one." They fought back the why the Federation fought, and the fighting back was a lesson in why the animal had looked at their bright corridors and been afraid for them. Force fields were raised around the dark decks. The creatures chewed the field emitters' power feeds, and the fields died. Security teams swept the crawl spaces in phaser lines. The creatures, eyeless, sound hunting, fast as whips in the conduits they'd been bred in, simply weren't where the light was. And two more teams learned in the dark what Ramos's team had learned. And after the second, Lost Werf stopped sending teams. They tried flooding the black decks with anesthetizing gas. The creature's rift-born blood shrugged off a chemistry evolved in a different universe. They tried remote drones. The drones' power cells drew the creatures like blood draws sharks, and the feeds showed 90 seconds of chitin and motion, and then static. Every answer the toolkit held was made of energy, and energy was food. At 1400 hours, the evacuation of the lower decks began. 1,000 souls compressing upward into the saucer. Families guided out of their quarters by officers with steady voices and unsteady eyes. The school on Deck 10 continuing its lessons because the alternative was letting 111 children sit and listen to the ship go quiet below them, deck by deck, like a great house closing its own doors. And at 1900 hours, with a third of his ship dark and his casualty list at 11, Jean-Luc Picard did the thing that great men and proud civilizations find hardest. He went to Deck 8, alone, and rang the chime on the quarters of the man he hadn't believed. Riddick was sitting in the dark. That was the first thing the captain noticed as the doors parted. The guest quarters unlit. The replicator alcove disassembled with quiet expertise into a workbench, and the stranger sitting at it in the black with his goggles pushed up on his forehead, silver eyes lifting to the doorway, twin coins of animal shine catching the corridor light. On the table before him, laid out in a neat row with the ritual care of a man who had done this many times before many long nights, 4 shivs, ground from chair steel and replicator housing, each one wrapped, weighted, finished. He'd been ready for a day and a half. He had simply been waiting for the knock. "Captain," Riddick said. "Mr. Riddick." Picard stepped inside and let the doors close and stood in the dark of Paradise's guest room, and being the man he was offered no preamble and no excuse. "You were right. I was wrong. My instruments told me the ship was clean, and I chose my instruments over your warning, and 11 of my people are dead, and a third of my ship belongs to the dark." The words cost him. He spent them anyway in full. "I've fought the Borg, Mr. Riddick. I have faced things that outgunned this vessel 1,000-fold, but I have never fought something that eats the fighting back, and every hour I spend learning what you already know is paid for in my crew." The captain of the Enterprise drew a breath. "So I am here to ask." "Ask what exactly?" The silver eyes didn't blink. Not cruelty, precision. He wanted it said. "To hunt," Picard said. "You know these things, you've survived them or their kin. You can see where my people are blind, move where my people die. I am asking the man my universe would call a monster to save the ship that locked him on Deck 8. A pause, and then, quietly, with the full weight of the 4-day argument behind it. "I am asking the dark for help, Mr. Riddick. You were right about that too. I'd not have known where to find it had you not been aboard." And Richard B. Riddick, who had been bought, sold, hunted, caged, and bartered by every authority in a universe of chains, who had waited 4 days in paradise for the catch and finally been handed it in the shape of a proud man's honest surrender, looked at the captain for a long moment. Then he stood and pulled the goggles down over the shine and began sliding the shivs into his belt one by one. And when he spoke, there was something in the low gravel that had not been there in the ready room. Not warmth. Riddick didn't do warmth. Call it respect, paid to the first warden in any universe who had ever come to his cell and said the words "I was wrong." Took your people 200 years to outgrow the animal, Riddick said. Took the universe 4 days to send one back. That's not your failure, Captain, that's just the dark keeping honest books. He picked up the last shiv, checked its weight, and made it disappear somewhere about his person. Here's how this goes. No leash. No escort teams dying around me. I move alone or with the Klingon. He's the only one aboard who won't shoot me in a dark corridor out of nerves. Your job is light and doors. Keep the bright decks bright, seal what I tell you to seal, and get your cubs and their mothers up into the saucer and keep them there. He rolled his neck once, the sound L. Ike gravel settling, and the goggled face turned toward the door, toward the turbolifts, toward the waiting black below. And when it's done, you and me talk about a shuttle. When it's done, Picard agreed, we'll talk about a great deal more than that. One more thing. Riddick paused at the threshold and the goggles turned back. Your engineer's wrong about the count. 60 adults, he said. Number's not the problem. He tapped the side of his nose. 4 days, 3 molts, and every stream of that stink in your air runs organized. Grazers scatter, Captain. These things are moving like they're spent, like something's deciding where they go and what they eat first. Your eyes, your fields, your power. In order. The doors parted onto the bright corridor, and the last thing the captain heard before the animal walked out into his ship was the flat, operational calm of a man naming an old enemy. Something down there is running the herd. You don't clear an infestation by killing grazers. You find the thing that's spending them. He was in the turbolift before Picard could ask how he knew. He was 2 decks down when the ship answered the question for everyone. At 1946 hours, in the middle of the 3rd evacuation wave, Deck 10 went dark. It should have been impossible. Deck 10 was saucer section, high country, bright country, 4 full decks above the frontier of the infestation, its EPS grid isolated and guarded, and it did not fail the way the lower decks had failed, gnawed slowly numb over hours. It went out all at once, every light and every sensor and every force field emitter in one surgical instant, as though something had studied the grid for 4 days and known exactly which 3 conduits to cut and cut them together. The school corridor, the family quarters, the evacuation route itself, 200 meters of children and parents and shepherding officers, mid-transit, plunged into a blackness their universe had never once shown them. The emergency lighting lasted 4 seconds, then something ate that too. On the bridge, the master display bloomed red, and Data's hands were already moving, already correlating, and what the android found in the failure telemetry he reported in the level voice he used when the news deserved screaming. Captain, the Deck 10 grid was not breached from below. Access panel records show the feeding pattern originated inside the deck's own crawl spaces. They have been there for at least a day, waiting. A microsecond's pause. And the movement I am now tracking through the dark sections is not dispersal. Thermal ghosts on the remaining sensors show 60+ organisms converging in coordinated columns, flanking the evacuation route on both sides, ahead of the retreat, herding the civilians away from the turbolifts and toward the darkened school complex. The gold eyes lifted from the console. Sir, pack predators do not develop siege tactics in 3 generations. This behavior is being directed. The telemetry supports only one conclusion. There is a coordinating organism, a progenitor, a beat. The second mass, Captain, the one that vanished 400 meters aft of Shuttle Bay 2, it did not vanish, it nested, and everything it has bred since has just been sent in perfect order to the one deck of this ship. He did not have to finish. Every soul on the bridge was already looking at the same red-drowned schematic, at the black stain of Deck 10 with 200 heat signatures huddled in its heart, at the converging columns closing on the school like fingers closing into a fist. The Queen had not sent her brood to graze. She had sent them shopping for the softest, warmest, most defended thing aboard. The thing Paradise had bet its whole philosophy on keeping safe. And into the turbolift shaft on Deck 12, alone, without orders, moving down through the dying ship toward the screaming dark faster than any elevator car. A man from a crueler universe had already pulled his goggles off and hung them on his belt and opened his silver eyes wide to the blackness of the shaft. He'd told the kid you had to kill a few people to get eyes like these. Time to show the other thing they were for. Working from the style guide, the payoff hunt, the dark contested for the first time, the rescue, the Jack Echo, with the impossible choice waiting at the close. Words. 200 souls learned that night what the oldest ancestors of every species knew, that the dark is not empty, that the dark is never empty. And then they learned the other thing, the thing even the oldest ancestors would not have believed. That sometimes, what moves in the dark is on your side. Deck 10 had become the bottom of the ocean. 200 meters of corridor without one photon in it, the school complex at its heart, and huddled inside the school's sealed doors, a teacher named Kellen Marr with 61 children, 4 parents, and 2 security officers whose phaser charges were the Bri. GH test objects on the deck, which meant, though none of them yet understood the arithmetic, that the 2 officers were not guards. They were bait. The creatures came up through the floor spaces and down through the ceiling runs, unhurried, eyeless heads swaying, reading the deck through the soles of their claws, the drum of small hearts, the scuff of small shoes, the hum of charged phaser cells, and they gathered in the black outside the school doors in their patient dozens, and began, with the horrible diligence of insects, to chew. The children heard it. That was the cruelty of it, the sound of the dark eating its way toward them, and nothing to see and nowhere to run. And then, somewhere out in the black corridor, one of the sounds stopped. Not faded. Stopped mid-chew, a wet interruption, a weight settling to the deck with a strange gentleness as though something very strong had wanted no noise. A pause. The eyeless head swayed toward it. Another sound stopped. Then a third, further left, and now the pack was turning from the doors, confused in its ancient blood, because the signals made no sense. No light, no power hum, no footfall, no heartbeat they could fix on, only their own number, diminishing in the dark, one quiet interruption at a time. Something was hunting them, in their dark, and it moved like they moved. Riddick came through the pack the way winter comes through a forest, silent, total, without malice or mercy either one, and the emergency battery light of a single doorway, flickering at the corridor's end, caught him for 1/2 second in passing. Goggles up, shivs reversed along both forearms, silver eyes wide open and blazing with reflected nothing, the man from the crueler universe doing the one thing evolution had built him for. He did not fight the creatures. Fighting is what you do to equals. He processed them, each kill a solved equation, the shiv finding the soft seam under the jawplate he'd learned on a 3-sunned world a universe ago. Every motion spent once and recovered. No wasted breath. No sound above a whisper. And the pack that had herded 200 humans into a box, the pack bred to own the dark, began for the first time in its short violent existence to know the feeling it fed on. Up on the bridge, they watched what the dying sensors could show, thermal ghosts, one warm shape moving through 40 cold ones, and the bridge of the Federation flagship went silent in a way it never had. "Mondia," someone whispered. "He's not engaging them," Riker said slowly, watching the warm ghost drift through the cold ones like a needle through cloth. "Look at the pattern. He's culling them, taking the sentries first. He's cutting the pack's eyes off the herd before they know they're blind." He looked up at Picard. "Captain, that's not survival. That's doctrine. He's fought a war against these things before." At the science station, Deanna Troi stood with her hand pressed flat against the console, reading what no sensor could, the mind out there in the black. The calculus she had described in the observation lounge 4 days ago, running now at full and terrible flower. She had told them he never stopped planning how he would. She was feeling, for the first time, what happened when would became is, and the thing that undid her was not the violence of it. It was the peace. The mind in the dark was quieter than sleep, quieter than meditation. Home in a way it had never once been in the bright corridors of paradise. "He's not afraid," she said softly. 60 of them alone in the dark, and it's the first time since he came aboard that he feels nothing like a trapped animal. She turned to Picard, and her dark eyes held the whole 4-day argument rewritten. "Captain, we kept asking what his universe did to him. We were asking it backwards. This is what it did. It built a man who is only at peace where everything else is prey." The school doors opened at 20:31 hours on Worf. The Klingon had come down the vertical crawlways with a naked mek'leth in his fist and no light at all, because Riddick had taught him the arithmetic in one sentence on the way down. They eat energy, so energy is a dinner bell. You carry a blade or you carry bait, and Worf, son of Mog, had heard that sentence the way other men hear poetry. He filled the doorway now, blade wet to the guard, and behind him the corridor's blackness gave up its second shape. The stranger goggled again for the children's sake or for his own. "Evacuation," Worf rumbled to the teacher, to the 61 small faces. "Deck by deck to the saucer. We are your escort." "There's no light," Kellen Mar said, and hated how her voice cracked on it. "The whole route's black, we can't see." "You can't," Riddick said. "I can." They moved them in a living chain, 61 children and their adults, each hand on the shoulder ahead, Worf's bulk anchoring the rear, and at the head of the line, leading 200 meters F terrified, breathing through absolute blackness, a convicted killer from a universe of chains, navigating by silver eyes and the map in his head, calling the turns low and calm. "Step up here. Ducked on the left, keep right. Hold." At hold, the whole chain would freeze, and the children would hear it, something in a cross corridor, the click of claws on deck plating, passing, fading, and then the low gravel again, unbothered move, and the chain would move, because the voice at the front of the line was the only thing in the dark that was not afraid, and courage, like fear, travels down a line of held shoulders faster than light. It was at the second junction, during a hold, that the boy spoke. He was maybe 9, third from the front, and he had worked out with a 9-year-old's ruthless logic that the man at the head of the line could see him even if nothing else could. Riddick heard the small breathing organize itself into a question, a full 3 seconds before it came. "You can really see, in this. Better than you can in daylight." A pause. The clocklicks faded somewhere overhead. The boy's whisper came again, exactly as loud as before, because 9-year-olds calibrate for wonder, not tactics. "Where do you get eyes like that?" "You gotta kill a few people," Riddick said. The chain's nearest adults went rigid. The boy did not. Riddick could hear him thinking, a small, furious churning in the dark, and then, with the gravity of a magistrate, "Did you?" And Richard B. Riddick, who had answered that question 100 ways in 100 slams, who had worn the answer as armor and as weapon and as brand, stood in the eating dark of a paradise he'd warned, with 61 small heartbeats strung out behind him on a chain of trust, and gave the only version of the truth that mattered tonight. "Save the ones you like," Riddick said. "Move." The chain moved, and somewhere behind the goggles, a man who kept no souvenirs filed the sound of that kid's fearless whisper next to the only other one like it. A girl called Jack. A crash site. A long night on a world with 3 suns, in the small locked room where he kept the reasons he kept doing this. They came up into the light of Deck 7 at 21:14. 61 children, 6 adults, 0 losses, into a corridor of waiting parents and medics, into weeping and light and noise, and the ship's monitors carried the image to every functioning screen aboard. The children pouring out of the black doorway, and behind them, stepping through last with a Klingon at his shoulder, the man their universe had filed as a monster. Blood on him that wasn't his. Goggles blank in the corridor light. The crew of the Enterprise looked at Richard B. Riddick, really looked, for the first time, and did not know whether what they felt was horror or awe, and were correct both ways. He didn't stop for any of it. He walked through the reunion like weather, took the tricorder out of a stunned ensign's hand, called up the ship's failure map, and studied the spreading black stain of the infestation for a long, silent moment. The pattern of it, the direction of it, the thing he'd told Picard someone was spending the herd on. Then he keyed the comm himself. "Captain, your kids are clear." A beat. "Now the bad news. I gotta look at the herd's traffic while we moved. Every column that isn't feeding is hauling toward the same place. Stern, low, center mass." Another beat, and the sound of the captain and the engineer both understanding at once, because there was only one thing at stern low center that mattered. "Whatever's running them has moved her nest, Captain. She's not behind your walls anymore." Geordi's voice came thin over the channel. "The intermix chamber reads normal. There's no way." "She's not in your engine room, engineer. She's around it." Riddick's gloved finger traced the failure map, the conduits, the plasma trunks, the great river of power running to the warp core, and the black stain wrapped around that river like a fist around a wrist. "She's laid her next clutch into the warp systems themselves. Smart girl. Biggest vein on the ship, and she knows you can't burn her out without opening the vein." He looked up toward the sensor cluster, toward the bridge, toward the captain of the gentlest universe, and delivered the arithmetic flat. "That's the game now, Captain. Her brood's in your bloodstream. Kill the nest wrong and the ship goes with it. Kill it slow and she outbreeds you by Thursday." A pause, and the goggles turned back to the map, to the black fist, to the numbers only he had run before. "There's maybe 2 ways to do this. You're not going to like mine." "And yours is." Picard's voice quiet from the bridge. "Mine's the one," Riddick said. "Your Federation's got a law against." The argument that decided the fate of 1,000 souls took place in the red emergency light of main engineering, 40 meters above a nest that was eating the ship's heart. And it was not really an argument between 2 men. It was an argument between 2 universes, having finally run out of room to avoid each other. The tactical picture was on the table, and it was very simple, and it was very bad. Geordi's scans, what scanning survived, had confirmed every line of Riddick's arithmetic. The Queen had wrapped her final clutch around the warp systems like a fist around a wrist, eggs laid into the conduit spaces along the great plasma trunks themselves. Her adult brood pulled in from every dark deck to stand siege around the ship's one irreplaceable vein. Burn her out with anything the ship had, and the vein opened, a plasma rupture that would gut the Enterprise from the inside. Wait, and she outbred them by Thursday. The infestation had stopped being an infestation. It had become a hostage-taking, and the hostage was the ship. And then Data refined the thermal imaging, and the picture got worse in the one way Riddick had been waiting for it to get worse. "Captain," the android isolated the readings, faint warm points inside the nest mass itself, arranged along the conduit walls with horrible regularity. The nest contained secondary heat signatures, human, 6 of them weak, sedated, or envenomed but alive. A pause. Ensign DeVary's signature profile is among them. The missing were not all consumed, sir. Some were stored. The red-lit room went silent. Live prey, cocooned along the walls of the nursery, food for the hatching, packed and breathing. 6 of their own, alive, inside the one place the ship could not touch. "Well," Riddick said into the silence, "there's the whole board." He leaned over the table and the goggles swept the schematic once, and the arithmetic came out of him the way it always came, flat, complete, already finished. "You've got one move that works, Captain. Cut the trunk feeds, vent the nest sections to space, all of them together before she feels the pressure drop. Vacuum does what your phasers can. Kills the brood, kills the clutch, kills her, doesn't touch your vein. Ship lives. Everybody topside lives." A beat, and he said the rest without softening it, because softening it was a lie and he didn't deal in those. "And your 6 people go out with the nest. They're not crew anymore, Captain, they're provisions, half envenomed, wrapped to the walls, an hour from being an egg's first meal. My universe has a word for spending 6 who are already spent to save 1,000 who aren't." The goggles came up. "Yours has a law against it. I checked." "We do," Picard said quietly. "It is called murder." "It's called math." "It is called murder, Mr. Riddick, and I will thank you not to dress it in cleaner clothes." The captain's voice did not rise. That was the thing about the man, Riddick had noticed. The quieter he got, the more immovable, and Jean-Luc Picard straightened over the table with the red light on his face and gave the animal the garden's answer, whole and unbartered. 6 of my people are alive in that nest. Alive. And the moment I vent that deck, I have not saved this ship. I have surrendered it. Not to her. A gesture at the thermal mass of the Queen, coiled in the dark around the core. To you. To your universe. To the arithmetic that says the weak are provisions and the trapped are already dead and survival is the only commandment. I have read 300 years of my species' history, written in exactly that arithmetic, Mr. Riddick, and I am telling you the sum it comes to. A civilization that spends its people to save itself will save itself all the way down to nothing worth the name. He planted both hands on the table. You have been right about a great deal aboard this ship. You were right about the dark, right about the herd, right about her. But you are wrong about this because you have never had the luxury of being anything else, and I refuse to accept that a universe as vast as this one contains only your answer or annihilation. There is a third way. There is always a third way. I have staked my entire life on it, and I am not stopping tonight. Silence under the red light. The 2 universes eye to goggle. "Okay," Riddick said. Picard blinked. "Okay." "Find it." The goggles turned back to the schematic, and there was something underneath the gravel that no one in the room could name, because none of them had been in the ready room 4 days ago. None of them knew they were watching a man test a belief the way he tested water for drugs, waiting for the catch, half hoping there wasn't one. "You've got till she feels us coming. Show me the third way, Captain. I've been waiting my whole life for somebody to actually have one." They found it in 19 minutes, and this was the part Riddick would carry out of that universe. They found it in the exact place he had told them their weakness lived. "The lights. They're photophobic," Geordi said, hands flying over the master display, the idea assembling itself out of him faster than he could speak it. Violently, it's not preference, it's biology. Their whole sensory system is built for absolute dark. That's why they ate our lighting first. And this ship, he pulled up the EPS schematic, the vast luminous river map of the Enterprise's power web. This ship is one giant lamp that's been running at 4%. If we backfeed the deflector array through the EPS grid, every conduit, every emitter, every light fixture and force field node on the infested deck simultaneously. We don't shoot them, Captain, we sunrise them. A photonic cascade, full spectrum, ship-wide, calibrated over their optical nerve threshold and under human tissue damage. It won't kill them. It'll do something better. He looked up. It'll blind and burn every organism in the dark sections at once. Seizure state, 30, maybe 40 seconds of total incapacitation. And human beings just have to close their eyes. Rescue teams standing by at every nest access. Riker picked it up, already moving. The burn hits, the brood seizes. We cut the 6 cocooned crew free and pull them out during the window. No venting. No plasma discharge anywhere near the trunk lines. The nest doesn't die. The nest goes blind, Worf finished, and the Klingons' teeth showed, while we take back our people. And then we burn it again and drive them off the vein into the sections we conceal. It was elegant. It was gentle, as war goes. It was the single most Federation piece of violence ever devised, turning Paradise's own light into the sword. And it had exactly one hole in it. And everyone in the room arrived at the hole at the same moment. And everyone in the room looked at the same man. "The Queen," Riddick said, saving them the trouble. He'd seen the hole before Geordi finished his second sentence. "She's not brood. She's not photophobic enough, thing her size, her armor. She rides out your sunrise angry instead of blind. And she's coiled on the warp trunk, which means the second the light hits and her children start screaming, she does the one move that beats your whole plan." He drew one finger across the schematic, across the great vein of the ship. "She opens the vein herself." Spite or strategy, with Queens it's the same organ. Your sunrise needs her off the core before it fires. Somebody's got to pull her. "Pull her how?" Riker said. "She's directing 60 organisms from the safest hole on the ship. What in the galaxy makes a creature like that leave her nest?" "The same thing that makes anything leave its nest," Riddick said. "Somebody kills enough of her kids." He was already checking the shivs along his forearms, already rolling his neck, already. Troy felt it from across the room like a change in weather, already at peace. "I've been doing it for 2 days. She smelled her dead on me since Deck 10. I'm the loudest thing in her world right now. I walk into the nest approach stinking of her children and start killing more of them. She comes off that trunk for me like the wrath of God." He pulled the goggles off and hung them on his belt, and the silver eyes came up shining in the red light. "I pull her into the open sections. Your sunrise fires. Your teams grab your 6. I keep her busy till it's done." "In absolute darkness," Picard said quietly. "Alone against that." "Captain." And there it was once briefly, the thing that might have been Riddick's whole autobiography, or the closest he'd ever come to giving one. "Alone in the dark against that is the only game I've ever been good at. Your universe finally found a use for it. Don't go sentimental on me now." The sunrise fired at 2:14 hours. For 4 seconds, the Enterprise became a star from the inside. Every conduit, every panel, every dead corridor of the black decks detonating into full-spectrum daylight at once. Light screaming through spaces that had known only dark for days. And through the nest sections the brood convulsed. 60 armored bodies seizing mid-motion, and the rescue teams went in through the blazing corridors with their eyes slitted and their hands fast, cutting 6 breathing colleagues out of the resin-wrapped walls of the nursery while the monsters thrashed blind around their boots. 40 seconds. They did it in 31. And 2 sections aft, in the deep black beneath the warp trunks where the sunrise had been surgically withheld. Because Bait needs shadow to work in, the Queen came for the killer of her children. She was worse than his memory of her cousins. 4 meters of rift-borne armor and grudge, faster than anything her size had a right to be, and she came out of the trunk spaces already striking. And what happened between them in the dark under the ship's heart was never seen by any camera because there was no light to see by. It exists in the record only as sound, 39 seconds of it, captured by a maintenance pickup. Impact and impact, a hiss like a boiler dying, a man's grunt of real pie. Once, the shriek of chitin on deck plating, and then a long, wet arterial quiet. When the lights of the sunrise's second burn reached that section, they found Richard B. Riddick sitting against the warp trunk housing with 3 ribs going their own way. One arm opened shoulder to elbow, and the Queen's head in his lap. Veins clear, he told the first rescue team conversationally through the blood. "Tell your captain," he considered, tipping his head back against the housing of the great engine he'd kept in one piece, silver eyes half-lidded in the returning light of paradise. "Tell him his third way worked. Mostly. Somebody still had to do it my way for 40 seconds. He looked down at the ruined queen, at the last monarch of the dark decks, and the thing he said then went into the ship's record and later into a captain's log, and later still into the argument of a hearing. That's the whole truth about our two universes right there. Write it down." By 300, the ship was ringed in light. The blinded brood herded burn by burn into the cargo sections and sealed behind bulkheads for transport to some uninhabited rock. Because the Federation did not exterminate even this, and Riddick, stitched and splinted in sickbay, laughed for a full 10 seconds when they told him, and did not explain the laugh. 6 crew came back alive from the nest, Ensign DeVary among them. The lights of Deck 36 came on for the first time in 11 years. The Enterprise had survived the dark, by the grace of its own light, and of the one man aboard who could walk where the light couldn't. And at 9:47 the next morning, the subspace queue delivered Starfleet Command's response to Picard's incident report. Priority 1, eyes only, and colder than the rift itself. Anomalous individual Riddick is to be detained pending formal assessment of status and threat. A determination hearing will convene aboard. Command notes with concern that a being of undocumented origin and lethal capability was granted operational freedom aboard a Federation flagship, and expects the hearing to resolve what precisely the Enterprise has brought into Federation space. Picard read it twice, alone in his ready room in the bright of the restored morning. "What we brought into Federation space," he repeated softly, to the empty room, to the old sword on the wall, to the universe of light that was already reaching for its categories again. He set the pad down. "No, Admiral. I rather think the hearing will resolve what Federation space is."